Welcome back to TK Tennis and the predictions video for the men's and women's final for Wimbledon. I know you want me to say Wimbledon, but I'm going to continue to say Wimbledon because I know it trolls all of you that are pronunciation police out there. I'm going to continue to mispronounce the names of Wimbledon and the players' names, probably just so that it helps me get more comments. And that's sort of a little YouTube hack. The more comments, the more you help the algorithm. And so for the rest of this video, maybe I should just call Yannick, let's call it Janik, and Carlos could be Charlos. Anyway, I'm more focused on the predictions themselves and trying to get those right. So let's first have a couple words about the semis. I was actually a little bit wrong about my Anisimova and Sabalenka prediction, even though I knew that was going to be the match that has the most likely chance of being an upset, and it was. With Anisimova, I said that whoever made more errors would lose that match, and whoever made less errors, of course, would win that match. That was actually not correct because Anisimova made, I think it was like 9 more unforced errors than Sabalenka did. And the turning point of that match in particular was the second serve return percentage. So when Sabalenka was serving second serves, Amanda won 60% of those points. On the flip side, when Amanda was serving second serves, Sabalenka only won 40%. So it wasn't so much about the errors, which I thought it was going to be about. It was more about the second serve returns and being able to take control of the point, which then led to more breaks of serve. So that was the deciding factor on that match. And then on the Fritz match against Carlos, where it was going to be a very tall order for Fritz to even have a real shot at winning that match, Fritz played as good as you can expect him to play against Carlos. He had a real chance, I think it was on his serve in the 4th set tiebreaker, to bring that match to a 5th set. That would have been amazing for Fritz to do, but he missed a forehand down the middle where he had a real opportunity to hit that for a winner, and he missed his chance to get that into a 5th set. And then Carlos was just too strong and closed out the 4th set, which I think he just likes to make it interesting and get to set points down and then win the set anyway. Congratulations to Fritz. You should hold your head high. And one thing I want to say to all the American players, in particular the American players, but it's not just the American players, but whether it's Fritz, and I haven't seen his press conference yet, whether it's Fritz or TFO or Tommy Paul, when they get into the press conference, Ben Shelton, they slouch back in their chairs, they have their hats down, they have their heads down, and they can barely speak clearly when they're in these press conferences after a bad loss. And listen, I get it. They're not happy about it, but they're professionals. Hold your head up high, sit up in your chair, answer the questions, be an adult. And let's jump into the women's final prediction between Iga and Amanda. And I'm going to say right up front, this might be the most challenging prediction I have made to date. Here's what we do know. Let's first go with what we do know. They have never met. So there's no visual history of them playing head to head. You just don't know a lot. There's a lot of unknowns here. The weather, we know the weather is going to be hot and it's going to be slow relatively for grass. And that favors, I would say, Iga. The court is playing slow for grass. Iga is a better slow court player. What we also do know is that Anisimova is an incredibly strong ball striker. She's very fluid and smooth and she hits through the court, very direct, and she's the exact type of player that gives Iga fits, very much like Ostapenko, Rybakina, and to some extent Sabalenka as well. Players that can really generate a relatively or more flat ball and drive through the court. Madison Keys, another one. That's Iga's kryptonite. So this is a problem for Iga in terms of the worst type of person that she could meet in the finals is what Amanda brings to the table. And Iga hasn't played anybody like this in the tournament except for the Danish player Claire Towson, who is also a big hitter and hits through the court. But Claire Towson is really a poor mover, and I don't know if I can take too much from that match. But she did beat her pretty easily. I think it was 4-2 or 2-4. So Iga is playing really, really well, and that again is another signal of making this match a little bit harder to predict. Okay, let's talk about Iga's advantages in this match. So Iga has clearly a speed and agility advantage, and that's a big advantage. And if this was the men's game, right there, that pretty much would be all you need to know in that sense, because Iga has such a speed and agility advantage. But this is the women's game, and the women's game is more about power than it is about the player's speed and agility. Not to say that it's not important, but I would put power as a more critical aspect in the women's game than speed and agility. Iga's advantage, or what she's been doing really well as well, is first serve, serving really well on first serves. She's going to need to continue that. It means Amanda's not going to be seeing a lot of second serves. And of course, Iga's advantage is track record. Her experience of winning many Grand Slams is going to be a big advantage for Iga. She's probably not going to be overwhelmed, even though it is her first Wimbledon as well. All right, now let's talk about Amanda's advantages. I mentioned it earlier, easy power. She's the type of player that gives Iga fits, and that's just a major advantage for Amanda. What we talked about earlier, the second serve return. If Iga's not serving well and Amanda sees a lot of second serves, she's going to put Iga on the defense quite easily, and that's going to be advantage for Amanda. And being a grass court, because the court is a little bit faster than it would be on clay, because of the way that Amanda hits the ball, hits through the court, that could really cause Iga to be on the defense. And here's the thing to know about Iga. She wants to take control as well, but if you take time away from her, she doesn't have a lot of time, her accuracy suffers big time, and she starts putting balls down the middle of the court instead of making her opponent run. So if you can put Iga under enough pressure, she's not nearly as accurate as she wants to be. So what are the takeaways for this match? I think Amanda controls her own destiny, and how she plays determines whether she wins or loses more so than Iga. Now you may think that's a little odd because Iga is also a big time offensive player and has more experience. But again, just because of how difficult it is for Iga to handle the type of ball that Amanda's going to bring, I give the advantage, or at least the control factor, to Amanda. And the prediction is, I think Amanda's going to win this match. So I have a scale now on my predictions. It's either a toss-up, where I slightly lean towards somebody, and that's what this match is. It is a toss-up. You could pick either player, but I'm going to lean towards Amanda in this match as the winner. And that's my prediction, that Amanda will win this match. But I can easily have it as a toss-up and say that Iga is going to win this match. The concerns are the win that Amanda had against Sabalenka in the semis. I would change this prediction entirely if I knew something, this one piece of data that I don't know. And it's, what is Amanda's mood like today on Friday as she's practicing for the finals tomorrow? If Amanda thinks that she has already accomplished something and she's in a good mood and she's not totally locked in today, that's going to cause problems for her tomorrow as during the finals. I think at this stage of the tournament, if you truly want to win a Grand Slam championship, there's not much time for celebration. Maybe the same night that she won the match, she can have a little celebration to win that match. But if I thought that her mood was a little bit too relaxed and comfortable and proud of herself on Friday, I think that's a huge mistake, and I would change this prediction to Iga winning if I knew that inside information. So if you have some inside information about her spirits and mood today, that would change my prediction on this dramatically. And she needs to be fully focused on her strategy and what she's going to do against Iga on Saturday. Now let's move on to the men's final between Jannik and Carlos. And we have to talk about what's different between the French Open and Wimbledon and their Wimbledon final. So what's different? Well, there's one major factor that's different. It's the surface. And even though Wimbledon's playing slow, it's not clay. The ball bounces differently, and that's going to have, or it's going to play a certain big role in Sunday's match. What we know is the head-to-head, that Carlos now has an 8-4 record against Jannik and a 5-match winning streak as well. So and of course, I think he's won the last 2 Wimbledons. So most things point to Carlos being the favorite in this match. And I made a prediction at the end of the French Open after Jannik lost to Carlos in the French Open that Jannik was my favorite for Wimbledon. So let's see if that holds up. Let's talk about Jannik's advantages. And his advantages are the return on the ad side. So when Jannik is returning serve, Carlos's kick serve has given him significant problems in other matches. The kick serve to the ad side of the court where it gets up really high to Jannik, and he has trouble, doesn't have trouble getting it back in play, but he has trouble getting his full accuracy, power, and control that he normally would. Now you might say that there's many other players out on the tour that have bigger kick serves than Carlos. So why does Carlos's kick serve give Jannik so many problems in big matches? And it's really simple. It's that Carlos can back up any return that Sinner gets if that's not really precise and not well placed. He can back it up better than anyone. So when Jannik makes a great second serve return to anybody else, those players can less often take advantage of it and do like a 1-2 punch, a serve +1, and end the point. If Jannik doesn't return a second serve perfectly, Carlos typically jumps all over it and can hit a winner off of whether it's a forehand cross court or a backhand down the line. It's just really difficult for Sinner to put Alcaraz on the defense, hitting a second serve, kick serve, return. On grass, that's not as much of a factor because the ball is not going to bounce as high. And if it's bouncing 6 inches lower or even a foot lower, that's a huge advantage. And towards Jannik, that Jannik's going to have more opportunities to break more comfortably than he did at the French Open. Now there's also Jannik's serving on grass. Jannik on clay has a problem putting Carlos on defense because the clay court slows up the ball so much. Well, that's an advantage for Jannik at Wimbledon because his first and second serves are going to be moving through the court a little bit better. Carlos is going to have a little less time to set up for those shots. So I think on both Jannik's serving and on his returning, we've moved the needle just a little bit towards the favoring Jannik instead of favoring Carlos like it was at the French Open. And then there's more chances to break because of that. And then, of course, on the regular rallies, the one shot that is now pretty much gone from Carlos's repertoire that he had on clay is trying to do the high, heavy topspin ball to Jannik's backhand, very much like a kick serve, but driving the ball and mixing it up the paces and the heights of the ball to Jannik's backhand. Because the ball bounces lower, it's going to stay in Jannik's zone or hitting zone more often than not. And that's also another slight needle movement towards Jannik's favor on grass. Now, Carlos's advantages. His movement and his lower center of gravity. Of course, we always talk about they're both phenomenal movers, but because Alcaraz is a little bit lower to the ground, he's not as tall, his center of gravity is lower, and on slippery surfaces, that advantage is pretty big for Alcaraz. And no matter how well a 6'5" guy can move like Jannik, and because of his skiing background, he just doesn't have the changing of direction speed like Carlos does. So that's an advantage to Carlos, and I would say even more so on grass than it even was on clay by a little bit, because I think it's going to be harder, even harder for Jannik to get out of the corners on grass, especially in the corners where the grass is actually full grass and not as much dirt. That's a more advantage than he even had at the French Open. And then, of course, the normal advantages that Carlos has. His ability to have a lot of variety in his game. His volleys, elite type volleys. So Alcaraz, if he uses a combination of drop shots to come into the net and brings Sinner forward a lot, huge advantage for Alcaraz to put away those volleys. So if you see a lot of forward and back movement from Jannik and he's not able to keep Carlos on the defense, Carlos is going to be able to expose Jannik like he has done in previous matches. And then the intangibles. Carlos pretty much wins on all the intangibles. He just has more options and more variety in his game, where Sinner, of course, is a little bit more one-dimensional, or a lot more one-dimensional than Carlos is. So the intangibles go to Carlos. So what's the takeaway for this match? The takeaway is, I think, like Anisimova, Jannik controls his own destiny in this match. If Jannik is playing well and they're going head-to-head, mano-to-mano from the baseline, and because of the more likely he's able to hold serve a little bit easier because it's on grass, and the slight more opportunities he might have to break Carlos, I think everything shifts like 1 or 2% more in Jannik's favor than it does in Carlos's favor. So I think Jannik controls his own destiny. So my prediction is that Jannik will win this match. Now, you could easily call this a toss-up and a 50-50 toss-up for either player, but I'm going to go a little bit more aggressive. I understand I could go in between a toss-up, but I think Jannik, I'm actually with a moderate amount of confidence. So it's not a lock that Sinner is going to win this match, but I have a moderate amount of confidence that the overall court conditions and the advantages that moves the needle slightly towards Jannik, and knowing how close it already was at the French Open, that I think that Jannik pulls out the win in this match. Could easily be wrong. You could call this a toss-up. You could call every match they have a toss-up. Or you could say that it's not a toss-up because Carlos has won the last 5 matches, that he clearly has the advantage and is the clear favorite, and Jannik is the clear underdog. And you could say that Alcaraz is at least a moderate favorite in this match. So I'm going to stick with my French Open. Wasn't a prediction at the French Open, where I thought that the favorite coming into Wimbledon was for Sinner. And I believed after watching them in the semifinals and throughout the tournament that Jannik does have the advantage here by a slight margin, and I'm picking Jannik to win with moderate or low to moderate confidence level. So there you have it. Amanda and Jannik are my predictions to win Wimbledon. I've been on a hot streak, making pretty accurate predictions for quite some time now. It could easily come to an end. And then those people who've been waiting to flame me in the comments, you can certainly do so. If I happen to be wrong about these finals predictions, you know, I can only be right so often, especially when you have matches of these calibers. I try and do these predictions and reviews as objectively as possible. And I've picked Alcaraz to win the French Open final. And maybe that says something about my objectivity. Maybe it doesn't. So thanks for watching. Please subscribe. And if you have any comments, leave them in the comments. And don't forget to like this video. And I will see you in the next Ace